Hello, and welcome to the Build Your Own Band podcast, the podcast made for independent artists who are looking to grow themselves in an organic, purposeful, and self-determined manner with them in the driver's seat. I'm your host, Vince Soliveri, and I want to introduce you to the first ever episode of the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. It might not be the official first because this show, full disclosure, is an interview show where I'm going to be talking to a lot of people who play music and work in the music industry. And today, it's just going to be me talking to you about the who, what, and why this podcast exists. I'll start with myself. My name is Vince Soliveri, and I am a producer, mixer, recording engineer, and I've been making records for over a decade. And I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing artists, bands including the Dirty Nil, the Drew Thomson Foundation, Terminator, the Redhill Valleys, Respire. Some of these releases can be heard on labels like Dine Records and Pure Noise Records. I'm really excited to start this podcast and launch it and have people view it and absorb it and listen to it or watch it or however you choose to consume this. So thank you for joining us. I have a bunch of interviews that I've already recorded that you'll see shortly and a bunch more to come that I'm really excited about. But I thought it would be a little weird to just, here's a podcast, here's an interview without knowing what you're tuning into. And I didn't want to do a big preamble before the first episode of what this is. I kind of want that episode to be that episode. So I'm making this one to tell you what this is and why we're here. The short kind of elevator pitch as to what this podcast is and why it exists is basically an educational resource for independent bands and artists to watch and learn from people who work in the music industry and have decades of experience under their belt that are just sharing what they've learned and how you can apply it to your own band. I keep on saying band, and that's obvious because that's in the title of the show. A lot of the information that we talk about can be applied to the music industry as a whole if you're a solo artist, but I particularly work with a lot of bands, a lot of rock bands, groups of people making music together. So this show is mainly focused on those groups, but if you just make music yourself, a lot of the information covered in this show will apply to you for sure. The reason I wanted to start this show is because as a producer who works with a lot of bands, a lot of independent bands, bands that are a little bit further along in their career that maybe are on labels, I've seen a lot of those bands succeed and put out their record and have a ton of people listen to it and have people come to their shows and their band kind of snowball and grow into a fully functioning career. And that's amazing. And there's other bands that come into the studio and work with me in which their intention is to get to that place. But for some reason, the record that we make doesn't really go farther than their friends or family. For the bands that walk into the studio that just do it as a passion project, they're super happy and all they want to do is play shows in front of their friends and family. And for those bands that have that clear intention, I 100% support them. Obviously, it's your band. You can do whatever you want with it. But a lot of bands want to go a little bit further than that, play in front of new audiences, gain their own momentum in their own fan base, maybe go on tour for the first time, or maybe go on a bigger tour than one they've already done, maybe get signed to a label, or just generally have a lot of people listen to their music and come to their shows. Isn't that the reason why everybody plays in bands? Even if you are an artist that just wants to do it for the love of the game, so to speak, I do think this podcast has a lot of awesome information that you can take away just to know how to like market your music or get it in front of a wider audience. But for the bands that really just like want to do this as a career and launch themselves into the stratosphere of rock and roll or whatever you're trying to do, this podcast is made for you. If you're tuning into this because maybe you know who I am or you're familiar with my work, then you know that I work with a lot of rock bands and that's kind of my specialty. If you don't know who I am and you've never heard of me before, or you just stumbled upon this because the algorithm magic happened and I'm suddenly in front of you, you might be asking, why does a producer who gets paid whether the album succeeds or fails, why do I care about any of this? The short answer to that is that nothing exists in a vacuum, and a band, regardless of how small or big they are, how they make decisions affects the people around them. Unless you're doing things like 100% DIY where you're recording your own music, you're mixing your own music, you're putting it out through your own streaming platform, or you're playing your own shows in a venue that you built with your bare hands, at some point, other people are going to be involved in the music that you're making. And truly, no matter what level of the music industry you're on, you exist in a community. So from my standpoint, a person who makes records, there's no greater feeling than when I work tirelessly on a record with a band and they put it out and they have a marketing strategy and they have awesome artwork and they have great promo photos, and all of that work behind the scenes kind of cultivates into putting together a really strong package and presentation of the band that leads a lot of people coming out to their shows, and they know which shows to play and they know which shows to not play, and they generally just make smart decisions that benefit themselves. Everybody that's affiliated with that band inevitably benefits as well. The producer that works with the band suddenly has an awesome record that they get to put on their portfolio, and the person who took the promo photos or maybe did the artwork also has something awesome to put on their portfolio because the band that they work with had a really strong creative vision. Promoter's super happy because that band played their show and brought a ton of people out to the gig. And maybe they've never been to that venue, or maybe they've never met that promoter, and suddenly all the people that go to the show start paying attention to whoever's putting on that gig. Essentially, when a band makes smart, good decisions, it doesn't only affect the band in a positive way, it affects everybody that they work with in a positive way, and it affects their community in a positive way. Not to say bands that make quote unquote bad decisions are ruining the music industry and torturing music professionals all over the place. That's not the case. A band playing a bad show or recording a record that doesn't get heard by a lot of people isn't the worst thing in the world. It's totally fine. You got to find your footing somehow. But I just think when a band puts a lot of effort into something and they spend a lot of money to record, or they spend thousands of dollars printing t-shirts and CDs only to shovel that unsold merch into a closet to be thrown out 20 years from now, it's just disappointing for everybody involved. And I feel like if you ask any person who's been in that situation if they would redo it over and make different decisions, 99% of them would say yes. So this podcast is basically an opportunity for people who are maybe trying to build their own band to the next level, whatever that next level is for you. For some people, it might literally just be recording your first album or playing your first show. For other people, it might be attracting label attention and going on a nationwide tour. Whatever level you're on, I believe that the conversations that I'm having with people that are going to be on future episodes of this podcast can bestow some knowledge that I think could be very helpful to you. The whole point of the podcast is to learn how to manage yourself as a band. 20 or 30 years ago, when maybe you can survive on pennies and be a starving artist and try things your own way and just go for it and not really have a care in the world, you could really shoot in the dark and just try a bunch of things and see what works for you as an artist and you as a band. But we live in a very different world now where the cost of living is just so high and a lot of people can't afford to take risks. That's just the case for anybody. If you're a musician or artist that's trying to get to a higher level of success, so to speak, I think having a sort of guideline of steps that you can follow to kind of expedite that process so you don't have to waste time, energy, and money doing things that aren't going to work, I think is super valuable. And that's why this podcast exists. In this podcast, I interview a ton of people who work in the music industry or play shows or book shows or make records or take photos or work in radio. Some of these people have years, even decades of experience under their belt. I have conversations with these people about their journey in their chosen path in the music industry. For example, in a future episode, I sat down with another producer, engineer, and mixer just like myself, and we talk about more or less the do's and don'ts of making a record. Instead of just Googling local recording studio and pressing a button and just hiring someone you don't know in a studio you've never been to, we kind of walk you through smart decisions that you can make to find the right producer, find the right studio, find the right people to work on your record, find best ways to budget for your record, especially if you're an independent band that doesn't have label support or grant funding or whatever it is. We talk about things that we've experienced in our collective 20 years making records and share that with you. So when it's time for you to make a record, you don't really have to guess the next steps. You can listen to our episode and we'll basically break down what are best practices when you're making a record, especially an independently funded record. So every episode is going to feature a new person whose niche specifies a specific part of the music industry. Since this show is called Build Your Own Band, BYOB for short, you'll notice that there's a lot of BYOB branding, and that's for the sake of brevity. I thought it was important to have our first episode with a person that's in a band that started almost 20 years ago, that really built up from nothing to something. That band is the Dirty Nil. My first guest is Luke Bentham, front person and guitar player of the Dirty Nil. And we talk about everything from the very, very beginning inception of the band and their journey to the success that they found along the way. We get into it a lot in the episode, but that band started as a high school band. And if you know anything about the Dirty Nil, you know that they've toured almost the entire world. They've put out 5 full-length LPs on Dine Records. The band has kind of done everything that you'd want to do in regards to playing in a rock band. That band has had a lot of successes, and they've also overcome a lot of challenges. And in that first episode, we talk about all of that stuff and how they've had to optimize their band through all its multiple iterations. When a band starts to grow, you kind of hit a ceiling as to the efficacy of your approach to the band. For example, if you're in a band that plays a bunch of local shows, maybe within an hour radius of your hometown, and you happen to get an offer to go on your first tour from Ontario to Nova Scotia, well, suddenly you're playing 9 to 12 shows in a row in a bunch of cities and a bunch of different provinces. I'm Canadian, by the way. This is why I'm talking about provinces. And that's a very different way of playing shows than playing within an hour radius of your hometown. So how do you approach this tour for the first time when all you've done is play local shows? We talk about stuff like that in this episode. And we talk about a lot of growing pains that a lot of bands end up having to experience just by nature of the shifting landscape of playing music. I like to think you can use this podcast maybe as like your personal handbook, in the sense that if you're in a band and you're struggling with something and you're not quite sure how to approach it, you can turn to the podcast and maybe find a episode that is relevant to the thing that you're experiencing right now, listen to it, and maybe it'll answer some questions for you that maybe you can't quite find just Googling things, because I'll be talking to real people with real life experience in the music industry, and I'll be picking their brain about every single thing that I can within an hour of talking. And everybody that I've talked to so far is so stoked to share this information, because it goes back to that point I was talking about before. If you as an artist have a ton of good information and you're making good decisions, everybody around you benefits. And you also benefit from it. And that old saying of, and I'm probably going to butcher it, rising tide raises all ships, or something like that. If I butchered it, please let me know in the comments. But you know what I'm talking about. It is entirely true for music. If you do something awesome, the people surrounding you are going to benefit from the awesome thing that you did. Just like if one of your friends' bands or a producer that you work with or whatever does an awesome thing and you're affiliated with them, it's going to rub off on you, and everybody is going to benefit from everybody doing awesome things. I'm a firm believer that information should not be gatekept. And I think people who feel like they have to keep their secrets locked behind a door is completely bullshit. Let that be the first swear word that's going to be said in this podcast, because I don't have the editing time to censor everything. I really truly believe that the only way to succeed in the music industry is to rely on the people around you, and those people rely on you. That other cliche saying of it's not what you know, it's who you know, is also super true. If you're a band that like sucks and writes terrible songs and has awful sounding recordings, but you're really nice and you make an active effort to make connections with people in your community, the people in your community will support you and give you constructive criticism on how to do better. And for the people that aren't going to do that and are just going to point at you and make fun of you, those people suck anyway, and their time in the music industry is limited. Those are the types of people that are going to play a show in front of 100 people, and it's going to inflate their ego, and they're going to think they're the biggest rock stars in the world. And then a bad reputation is going to follow them that they can't break because their egos are too inflated and nobody wants to work with them. And 10 years later, they're selling real estate. But luckily for you, most people, at least the ones that I've interacted with, are really cool and are really stoked to share as much as they can with you. And once again, that is the purpose of this entire podcast, for people with experience to share their knowledge with you, because we know that you having awesome information is going to result in awesome things happening for you and everyone surrounding you. I can't stress that enough. I keep on saying awesome because it's the only word that's coming to my head. And full transparency, I've recorded this intro like 6 times and I just don't know how to use a camera. So apologies if my vernacular isn't that varied. But yeah, that's essentially what the show is. It is simply an interview show where I talk to people who work in the music industry to share information. It's not my soapbox of what I think bands should or shouldn't do, which is kind of what it is sometimes, because I like to talk and I have a lot of strong opinions about a lot of things and I will not be quiet about it. I apologize. But I can say from my own firsthand experience, having conversations with people who have a lot of experience that are happy to share what they know with other people has led me to where I am today. And I've made a lot of records with a lot of awesome bands simply because people gave me the time of day when I had questions about the thing I was struggling with. I think one of the most important things in the world of music or any creative field or anything, if you're a carpenter or an electrician, I think this is just as important. But having a mentor is absolute key to moving forward in the chosen path that you're on. Some people are lucky to be in a big city with a hustling, bustling music community in which there's a ton of people around all the time that you can interact with and make friends with and grow a community with. But other people might not have that in their city, or maybe they don't know about it, or they're just moved to a new city and they're trying to find out where those people are. Luckily for those people, the internet exists and you can absorb shows like this. And there's a ton of other great information online about these very things beyond this podcast. This podcast is simply a way for me to share conversations that I've had with people in private and thought, oh, I think this would be really helpful for other people to hear. By no means is this show like a be-all, end-all. These are the 5 things that you need to do to get immediate success with your band. I don't think there's like a get famous quick scheme out there in regards to growing your band in an organic way, maybe in an inorganic way. If you're looking for that get famous quick scheme or whatever, this isn't the show for you. Thanks for stopping by, but you're in the wrong place. If you're trying to do it in a very organic way, in a self-determined way, in a way where you don't feel like you have to sell your soul to make it, this podcast, I think, is going to be very helpful for you. And I think you'll benefit from the future conversations that you'll hear. To reiterate, the first episode, which will be dropping soon, is with Luke Bentham of the Dirty Nil. If you're interested in listening to that episode, please follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, buildyourownband_podcast. You can subscribe on the YouTube channel or on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you're listening to podcasts. Alternatively, I encourage you to visit my website, vincesoliveri.com/subscribe, to subscribe to my mailing list, in which I will notify you directly as soon as the first episode drops. And beyond episodes, there's going to be other content that I'm going to be making that's relevant to being in a band and making your own music, demoing and music production and building and crafting songs. That stuff is still in the works, but please visit vincesoliveri.com/subscribe to add yourself to my mailing list so you will be notified as soon as all of that stuff is available. I'm Italian, so I will spell my name out for you. VINCESOLIVERI.com/subscribe. Full transparency, every day I wake up just filled with dread of, oh my God, why am I starting a podcast? I'm not cut out for this. People are going to make fun of me. This is going to ruin my life. So if you're watching this is video proof that I found the strength and encouragement to finally do this. So I'm quite proud of myself for doing it. I hope you enjoy the journey that we're going to go on together. And I really, really, really appreciate you sticking around to the end to listen to this first episode of me just talking at you for a bit. Stay subscribed and see you on the next one.